Hey Nick,
Hey Tom,
how are you?
I'm well. You?
Oh, I'm. I think I'm good. I had to think. I didn't want to be dishonest. Yeah, like as you know, many people just say that as filler or empty greeting.
Yeah,
Um, but you're one of the people I know actually cares about the answer.
yeah,
So I wanted to make sure I was giving you the right answer. Yeah, I think I am good.
totally understand that.
um, So before I forget, I wanted to like follow up on the Alfie Cohen thing. I don't know. Do you want what I liked first, or do you want my critique first? Which do you want?
Um, uh, Tell me what you liked first. Yeah, good, cool.
So what I liked is, as I chatted you, was that it parallels my research in international relations, like
Oh,
and that concept of soft power and hard power.
mm,
The beginning of what you said about Cohen, and it differed at the end, but that is a good thing because it makes me think it's, and I haven't processed it yet, so this is an
yeah,
incomplete thought. But if the polarities that Alfie is speaking about are wrong in education, then perhaps the polarities that are paralleled in international relations are limited as well, which is intuitively makes sense. Like the scholars who write these books who are like so embedded in their camps, like they're usually not. And again, I'm speaking for international relations, not necessarily education or anything else. But
yes, yes.
most of the people who write the books that are entrenched in these camps, they're not the ones who are in the State Department or in the White House or in the field who are living it.
Yeah,
The people who are living it usually pull something that works from this and something that works from that. I do think that part of the problem with the neoconservative movement, like with Richard, there's a guy in the Bush administration who was the leader of the neocon movement, and then he's the one that kind of brought in John Bolton, and up until John Bolton's fallout with Trump, I thought that Bolton had like blinders on and didn't see the nuance. But essentially, soft power is incentives that if you want to get a country to do what you want it to do, you give them aid, you give them students scholarships. You do like friendly sports matches. Like, it's, believe it or not, like, you get this, but a lot of people laugh at me. I go, but friendly soccer games are huge.
yeah,
Like, you're about to go to war with a country, have them over for a soccer game.
yeah.
You know?
Yes, brilliant. Yeah.
And then the hard power is the sanctioning and the bombing.
Mm.
Right? And then my master's work was in sanctions. The master's, my final, it wasn't like, they didn't call it a thesis, but my final project was the ineffectiveness of sanctions to end genocide or acts of dehumanization. And because, like, if you bomb a country, my argument is, you bomb a country, you actually are helping the country because you're making the the leader of the country you're bombing, you're making them look like a victim to their own people, and you allow them to play the nationalism card and say it's us against the United States.
Sure, very good.
But
Makes sense to me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've
And
said, go
uh,
ahead.
excuse me one second. It to me, that's the same reason, similar reason, why animal trainers, and I've always said this to my students for years, if you're an animal trainer and you're training an orca, you'd better not use sanctions. You'd better not, yeah, to use your word, you better not use, because then the trainer is going to be lunch
Yeah,
for the orca. And that's what happens with this intentional infliction of pain, which we just don't get. And we need to, I mean, mythically, I think so highly of myth, as you know.
mhm.
We need to go way back to our Hebrew and our Greek influences, and understand how we don't understand our Hebrew influences and beginnings, and then and how Christianity, I suspect this is what happened, that Christianity reinterpreted those and never understood the religion of Jesus in terms of God will punish you if you don't obey. And that makes punishment good. Spare the rod and spoil the child. And you can use that in politics as well. Go, please continue.
This is exactly, we're on the same page.
Good.
What's funny about us? I think like we are often on the same page, but then we have our own twists on it, and I always learn something.
I always thought that about you, Tom.
The trajectory is always the same.
Yeah. You come at it from a different angle, from a different perspective. And I've learned to really appreciate that, because, it's easy to get stuck in my own head.
Well, I mean, like one of the things that you've taught me the most is inclusive language. And like, I mean, I know we just talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but the first time I heard you say philosopher queens in the early summer, I laughed, and then I laughed at myself for laughing. You know what I mean?
Nice.
And then so when we did it this fall, it was like, and I've started using it myself too, like in my classes. So yeah. In any case, but back to the sanctions. So, like I've said for 20, well, maybe even more than 20 years now, but at least 20 years. Like I've said, you want to end the Iranian-U.S. negativity. Like I could end it in the amount of time that we've been perpetuating it. I could have ended it, which is, give me like a half of 1% of, no, give me a quarter of 1% of the federal budget, and allow me to make those into student loans or student scholarships, and bring over Iranian middle class men and women to go to colleges in the United States or go to graduate school. And the only condition I would put on the scholarship is that you are not allowed to apply for a green card. Like you have to go back to Iran. And so then those men and women over the course of like a decade, say, they get American degrees, they have American roommates, they eat American food, they watch American TV, and they go back to their country. And, they open up a business. And who are they going to open up a business with? Like, it's going to be a guy who goes, hey, I went to college with an American who he did, and we were both business majors. Like, I'm going to sell Persian rugs, and we'll create an import-export business. And then there's mutual investment and mutual wealth. And then when the Ayatollah or the president of Iran goes, we're going to bomb America, then it's not the United States going, oh, no, you're not, because we're going to bomb you back. The middle class of Iran themselves will go, hey, shut up.
Yeah.
I'm making money off of America. Or that's my best friend from college that you're talking about bombing. And that's soft power.
Yeah.
And that's soft power that works in the classroom too. But my critique is, and I'm biased, so I don't know, maybe you can help me. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to take my own bias and what I'm about to say away in the classroom.
Okay.
Because
what is that bias, Tom?
Because I think that you can incentivize learning in the classroom, and it can be a form of soft power, which Alfie kind of says is actually, I'm going to park that. I'm saying, but there are people who teach who take whatever I call soft power. They focus on being like the good guy and being the buddy of the students, and there's like that they fall so far to use that word soft, they fall so far into the soft that they're not encouraging learning. They're an easy A. So how do any of us who are trying to not be like the arduous old school teacher of memorization and discipline and tons of feedback, and everything that can push students away from learning or just trains them poorly as orcas, waiting for them to come out of the water and snap our heads off.
Yeah.
Where's that middle ground? And I think that's what we ended when your presentation about is that what Alfie was saying is, yes, it's easy for me to see how like the hard power and the old school teaching is detrimental. And I can see how being the good guy can go too far the other way, but I don't know where the middle ground is. I have a couple of ideas, but I'm going to stop. You talk. Like, what's going on in your head?
To me, this is vital. And I find myself professionally and existentially, morally, right exactly in this spot where you have identified yourself and I identify myself, Tom. I'm not sure yet that you and I are coming at this from different perspectives. I think we're so much on the same page. But this is why I said at the beginning or the end of my little presentation the other day, that not all compliments are designed or are affected in terms of reward. So I think that is, a very interesting discussion in itself. Since I'll use your language. It bothers me, Tom, but I think I see myself as an easy A kind of guy. And it doesn't bother me at all.
You struggle with thinking that you're an easy A?
Yes. I don't want an easy A. I don't want to be an easy A kind of guy, but I don't seem to want to, I don't seem to feel guilty about that. I feel pressured by the systems, and this, by that I mean any system. I teach for CU, University of Colorado also, and it's the same thing there. And so, professionally, I have to watch it. But bottom line, I'm concerned. I keep asking that question, as I said the other day, Tom. What are our expectations about learning? What do we think that word means? And am I maybe accomplishing that? And I don't care about the grade.
I think that this is one of those situations, this is your field, not mine, but this is something that exists in philosophy, or the gift of philosophy, which is the fact that you're asking the question means that you're not what you're afraid of being.
Yeah.
Right? That, like, I think that there are people in our department who probably are easy A's, or at other institutions that are easy A's. And I think the difference between the easy A and maybe you and myself, God willing, is that we're worried about it. We're worried about being the easy A, but we also want to teach. I think the people who fall in the trap of soft power or easy A, they no longer worry about being an easy A.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, good. That's nice. That's a nice analysis. Tom, I don't want to change the subject, and this is not changing the subject. You may know this site, internet site. It's called academia.edu.
Yeah.
I get these papers, and recently, I think maybe, Tom, I have come upon something that may interest me and may interest you, and I'm still playing with it. I'm printing articles, scholarly articles about it. And my beginning here is going to be with a study of Martin Heidegger, and his interest in East and West thinking, because he finally said, with his Zen correspondent in Japan, that this is what he was trying to say, that he has a notion of, and this is the title of this paper, this particular paper, Heidegger, East and West, Philosophy as Educative Contemplation. And I'm in the process of unpacking that, of trying to understand what that means, because I think, Tom, it's the page that you and I share. We are no longer interested in, as we say, and John Dewey wrote against this, opening up a brain and pouring information into it. That is to say, that is our relationship to content. We're not doing away with content. of course, we're retaining content. There is always content. There is always discipline. It's not possible otherwise. But what we must pay attention to, I think, here is our relationship to content and our relationship to the student. This contemplative view is more on the Socratic recollective view. You know that story. And while it sounds silly to us, it holds such respect for the child, for the student at any level. It assumes that they're not the tabula rasa, they're not the empty vessel, and that we are pouring stuff in there. We are assuming it's there, and we are encouraging reflection, not memory.
And it goes hand in hand with that dichotomy between in teacher preparation and teacher education philosophy of the mage on the stage versus the guide on the side, right? That you don't even have to have that debate if you're internalizing what you're describing right now, because if your pedagogy is based on the reflective process of the students, then that immediately puts you there at the level with the students as co-learners and not the ego trip of being that mage on the stage.
Perfect. Well said.
And I think what I hear you saying, this is bridging several different conversations and thoughts that you and I have had, as well as, so I apologize if this is too private, because you've always, when you've talked about religion, you've always said that you were raised Christian, and then recently I realized that you always say that you were not raised Catholic, which was my assumption because of your Italianness. But I saw on your Facebook page, Seventh-day Adventist.
Yeah, and of course you recognize that that's a very Jewish take on Christianity. And I did that to most of my grade school and certainly high school here in Colorado, as it was a boarding school, and a couple of years of college.
Nick, how did you get out? Did you, because it's a mind shift, like were you brought out? Is it part of your own personal growth? Like, well, that is a very closed group.
You and I are very holistic. And I learned things from, I learned stuff particularly in high school, from some wonderful teachers who were bad boys and bad girls. They encouraged me to question. Within that system, they encouraged me to question, and that encouraged whatever philosophical tendency I had.
And they were practitioners as well, or just teachers at the school?
No, they were all practitioners. Yeah, I don't think there were any teachers at my academy that were not Seventh-day Adventists. Well, it's of course, having experienced it from the inside, I recognize that it is not. I don't even consider it conservative, and it's certainly not fundamentalist. But I think it might tend to attract that kind of personality, because I find these discussions of conservative religion, liberal religion, really not about religion, and certainly not about theology, but actually about psychology and human personality, the psychology of religion, the psychology of ethics. We don't engage that kind of discussion.
And I have to apologize to your school. I should not have said, how did you get out? I think you know what I meant. I meant, how did this get out? In my head.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I did the head thing. The head thing first. That prepared me for when I came back. I literally, most people don't bother to do this, but it was personally important to me. I had my name taken off of the membership. It just didn't make any sense to me to, as we say, belong to an organized religion. And then, I discovered, and then of course I was already broadening my spirituality to include Catholicism, to include Eastern Orthodoxy. There's so much in Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy that I really value spiritually.
Was that related at all to your heritage? Because it is for me, so I don't want to project on you, but you are Italian. 99% of Italians are Catholic. So
Yes,
is
sure.
your appreciation of Catholicism part of your ethnic heritage, or is it purely intellectual?
It may be in my blood, Tom. My grandparents probably wouldn't appreciate it. Of course, they were Catholic in southern Italy, but then they came here, and I don't know what the contacts were, but they became Seventh-day Adventists. They must have come in contact. They were very, very poor people. Perhaps there was a contact through charity there in Newark, I think, and so they made that change, and then. But I have family members who are Catholic, who remained Catholic, and so on. Most are Protestant. But I had to just cut out, and it was okay. I know many people who, like so many Catholics, hold grudges, and are very happy to have split from the church. Well, mine, you and I are not like that, and I didn't have to hold a grudge.
No, and Nick, I'm sorry I keep interrupting you, but I'm
Not a
just
problem.
out because this is because the little hamster wheels are spinning, because I think that first of all, you and I have such a parallel experience, and the way that those words came out of my mouth, how did you get out? Like, you could say the same thing to me. I was raised Catholic within similar structures. And how did I get out? And my answer would have been the same as yours. I had teachers who, within the system, lit that flame, and that's where I think that our multiple conversations are all the same conversation, because our conversation about theology and what religion is essentially the same thing that you were just talking about educational pedagogy, because like that literal interpretation of religion or dogmatic understanding of religion fits with the idea of education, secular education, even as it is, as that transfer of knowledge or the passing of content.
Yes.
And then whereas you and I, as educators as well as spiritual beings, see content as just a tool to get at what's really going on, which is that dialectical conversation, which like we all like synergistically then learn from each other and just like explode like right now as I'm geeking out. And
yeah, beautiful, well said. Yeah, I mean, it really worries me, Tom. And this is one of the draws I find in Eastern studies, in Hinduism and Buddhism particularly, and Mahayana on the Zen side specifically. I'm concerned about monotheism, Western monotheism, have for a long time, because of how we approach it psychologically, how the masses, I'm referring to the masses, that really worries me, because it's the ego that obeys, and that's tricky.
Right.
It isn't about the whole Christian interpretation of the Jewish experience, that you have to obey God, is really not going to be shared by wise rabbis and wise, knowledgeable Jewish scholars. It might be on the ground with people, with the members, as it were. They may think it's about reward and punishment. We haven't changed our subject, have we? And that really worries me, and it worries me, Tom, within the context of Seventh-day Adventism, because I think that's what most of the people did. It was all about it, and they would criticize Catholics. Of course, there's often in Protestantism an anti-Catholic, view, and that is unfortunate, because they're all doing the same thing. They're all obeying. And I want to say there is something to be questioned here about obedience. It's not what it appears to be. And if it's not, and this is why, this is the beauty of the Song of Solomon. This is the beauty of that relationship of marrying the church and so on, of marrying Jesus, used, of course, in Catholicism, not in Protestantism. But that's the beauty of it, that relationship is closer to to spiritual truths than is obedience. And Freud got it right? God is Big Daddy in the sky, and we must obey him, or he is going to get pissed off. And if we can't find our way around about that and find new dimensions of human experience, we're in serious trouble. Well, then here comes, I get my 1970 January, I got out a couple months early from the military because I had been accepted to CU Boulder. And soon after that, I had my first class in Buddhism, and something clicked, because this was no longer about obedience. And there are considerable, this as well as I, a considerable number of American Buddhists who are Jewish. And there's a good reason for that. And I'm beginning to understand why that is. How could there possibly be anything interesting of this kind of Western monotheist and non-theism? But it is in the...
One of the things that I hear you saying that resonates with my lived experience and how I phrased it is, when you're talking about obeying and the ego, like, to me, many, if not most, of the Western religions are about command and obedience, as you're saying, and that's why they're missionary religions, particularly Christianity and Islam. And whereas the Eastern religions, and I don't mean to be naive in any way at all, but they're more like invitations. It's the command versus the invitation.
That's nice, Tom.
And so I think that Judaism and Hinduism, they're not missionary. They don't, as I say in my religion classes, they don't want you. And so that is the exact opposite of ego and command.
Exactly.
But I'm also fascinated by that connection that you're saying right now about Buddhism and Judaism, because I guess I would say that those are, but they're more of ways of life than religions in anything else as well.
Indeed they are. And I think that's probably a nice, pedagogically, I think that what you just said is a very nice way to enter this delicate and very difficult and tricky discussion, even if students are spiritually minded. And some, as you know, some are, probably most aren't, but some are. So I am now guided by two ideas that I consider of spiritual quality. One is mystery. And in terms of mythos, Judaism has been truest to mystery, and Buddhism is also true to it. Mystery meaning ineffability, philosophically, ineffability. Now in Hinduism, we have this wonderful kind of monotheism, but in terms of any hierarchy, and it really isn't a hierarchy, you have all these many what people think is polytheism, and it really isn't. And those are just incarnations, just like Jesus is an incarnation. You understand that. But that, so to speak, mystery at the top, say a Plotinus, a Plotinian, the one is unknowable, as Plotinus was. Well, that's why Plotinus gave us one of the first intelligent analyses of via negativa, which I wrote about so much in my dissertation. So, but Brahman is not it cannot be personified. It is a principle. Yahweh is a principle, and I think I could probably get any good rabbi to agree with me.
And it's unknowable, right? It's not just a principle, it is unknowable. And therefore, like that's what you're talking about the lack of obedience and ego, because if it's unknowable, all we can do is do our part on the journey of trying to discover the truth. It's something that we already have and hold and are going to convert other people to. And I think that's the mistake that, as you often talk about, when Christianity lost its Jewish roots and became Greek, and then I think Islam in many ways followed that path, with the exceptions of the Sufis, that Western Christianity and Islam fell into that trap of we have the truth and we know it, so therefore it becomes ego and command.
Beautiful, Tom. We are on the same page. We can't, I mean, after all, Tom, and you and I feel this deeply, and we know the history, we know the culture. We're talking about our soul's salvation here, Tom. We can't mess around about that. We must have positive knowledge, and the ego is what holds that positive knowledge. That's why I'm a skeptic. Philosophically, I am a skeptic because it is holy, because it is humble.
Yeah. Whereas the opposite, as you said, it's like it's a false humility to obey these centralized religions.
Perfect.
Because it is a vacillation of your own mind and creativity and thinking. You're giving up, and then that giving up, you're convincing yourself is obedience, when it's actually a betrayal of yourself.
Beautiful. Wow. Damn. This conversation's been a long time coming between us, and I think I've been just longing for it. Hear it. I'll give it, this. I love talking to somebody who knows things as well or better than I do. This is the Akedah. This is the Abraham story. Abraham had no language. Had he had a language, or he felt that he had to tell Sarah, she would have killed him right then. She was Jewish, for God's sake. She would have let him have it right then and there. There was no way that was going to happen. But he had this was the great ineffability for him. I don't know how he knew what he knew, that he heard a voice, and the voice was not psychotic, but was actually a deity that he dared not name. And that's an interesting part of Jewish history at the beginning, as you know, that really, really interests me. So we have him awakening during the night, and this gets to my second part. One is mystery. The other is that what all viable spiritual paths have on this planet in our species is dissolution of ego. This is why I get all excited every time you talk about ego, because I think that we're on the same page there. We find it in Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, all of them. They've all lost their way, all of them. But, and why? Because Aristotle was right. Human beings by nature desire to know. And that is a real trap, spiritually speaking. And Aristotle was not a spiritually minded person. Plato, yes, as you and I know, but not Aristotle. He was the scientist. And he knew that we wouldn't. It's beautiful. I mean, he was brilliant, but he was not spiritually inclined, so he didn't care about those things. And then of course that got on a path that makes skepticism look stupid, because they think skeptics are saying we can't have any knowledge, and that's a silly trap. They're not saying that. They're saying the nature of knowledge cannot be certain. Well, if it's not certain, where does that leave us?
Back off, because you're a little too full of yourself. That's what the skeptics are saying. They're not saying we don't know. They're saying you don't know.
Yes.
And I do want to say, though, yes, all of these religions are misguided, but at the same time, there are people within religions
Absolutely, there are.
who get it. Have you ever read Fowler, Joseph Fowler? He's at Emory University, he used to be at Harvard, and he wrote Stages of Faith. And it's what you're describing is so much about what Fowler's saying, which is that he basically took Erickson's stages of human development and applied it to faith development, but that unlike human development, well, as Erickson would say, yes, you can be stuck in a stage of development psychologically, even if you're physically progressing. And Fowler's arguing the same thing spiritually, that there are, even in those Western centralized, egocentric, top T truth religions, there are people who realize that it's a facade, and that it's a really a personal journey. And then he talks about those as like stage 6 people and stage 7 people that can go in and out of religions, like you. Like I bet you, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I bet you, if you felt the desire, you could equally pray in a mosque or in a Seventh-day Adventist church or in a Catholic church or in a Buddhist church, because you get what it's about.
Yeah.
You know, and that, honestly, it goes back to our first conversation about Alfie Cohen and pedagogy, doesn't it? That when you were saying, this is now, it's crystallizing in my mind, what you were saying about the strict teacher and the easy teacher. Forgive me that wasn't the words that Alfie Cohen was using, but that the two sides of punishment and incentivization are equally dangerous to education. And because they're the same thing. Yes. That's what you were saying last week that I wasn't completely getting when you were saying, is it they're both the same thing because they are being perpetuated by people who think they have the truth.
Yes.
And in this case, in the classroom, it's a content truth. And whether that is the strict teacher who is, you will learn this because I know everything, or the golly gee shucks, easy A, you'll do great in this class because I know everything and I'll make it fun and interesting.
Yes.
That they're the same person.
Yes.
Because they're not inviting the journey and that dialectical discussion that you're talking about.
You know what? One of my most brilliant professors at CU Boulder was well known in his field. His name was Forrest Williams, a phenomenologist and existentialist and gestaltist, gestalt therapy. We had a conversation once, and we were talking about gestalt, and he said he was this kind of wise person, and he said, finally, it isn't about technique, it's about the relationship of the therapist to the client. And I thought that I just know something like that is true. I mean, it has this wonderful, and I see education as therapy, and I think it's therapy for both the instructor and the student. Just as you said, I'm just commenting on what you just said, and using a little different language for it. But yeah, there's a big there's that huge difference, and that relationship to content, I think, is so much of what we're talking about when we're talking about learning. Because, and this is much of what this Heidegger paper is about, and this is what Derrida and particularly other postmodernists have taken from Heidegger and expanded on, and that is that knowledge, Heidegger began to recognize that knowledge was not about presence, the presence of something, and that's how we see it. He saw knowledge as contemplation.
This journey. It's
a journey. That's a good metaphor. Yeah, and so that that already adjusts one's relationship to content and relationship to the student.
Yes, and I love this, because you know what I was thinking when you were saying that is that it's what you said, the relationship that we have with the content. In the classroom, the content becomes God, and therefore the teacher, because they have the content that's achievable and known truth, capital T, the classroom teacher becomes the high priest of that knowledge. And that's the parallel that we're talking about.
Yep.
Whereas if you know that it's elusive and that each of us has a piece of the puzzle, and it's through that our relationship with the truth that's not hierarchical and obedience, because obedience is not a relationship. Even in a family, you raising a child or being raised by parents, right? That it's still relationship based. It's not obedience in and of itself as that capital T. So we're invited to a triangulated relationship spiritually between the divine, ourselves, and others, and in the classroom between the content, the teacher, and the students.
Oh, very nice, Tom. Very nice.
I can't do this without you, brother.
No, I hadn't thought about that. But I'm thinking, what about would it work then in terms of Fowler and Erickson and Stage's kind of thinking that we get stuck at the level of obedience at a primal Freudian relationship, and it never gets away from there because we get such goodies from obeying. And of course, I can always convince myself that I'm getting it right, because that's just an easy thing for human beings to do. And particularly if there's an authoritarian religious content here, then I can say, yeah, no, I'm getting it right, and I'll just stay on this path, and so on. And that's stuckness, as we say. No, good. How do we? Excuse me for interrupting. How do we communicate then to students who from nursery school have been taught the lies, who have been taught the lying relationship? And that's who you and I deal with all the time. And very few, fortunately some are, particularly, I think, Thomas, in an art school, we find the imagination for crossing over into a different relationship to content.
So here, wow. So here, to parallel with when you presented to my students a couple of weeks ago. So, and I know this is egotistical to say this, but I also think it's affirming. I'll say it of you. It's affirming. Like, if as a philosopher king, Nick, what you're doing in the classroom is you have left the cave. In the classroom, you were going back into the cave and inviting those students to come out. But here, to the easy A, when you take those people out of the cave, some of them just run away. They're out of the cave, they think they're free, they got their A, and they're gone, and you never see them again. But some of them stay with you because they realize where they left and where you brought them to. And those are the ones who become the next generation of philosopher kings and become educators, whether it's in a church, a synagogue, a temple, a mosque, or in a classroom. And they then continue the journey, and they go back into the cave and they bring out the next generation.
And you're describing yourself as well, and you know that, and that's good. Yeah, we are not only dealing with content, but we're dealing with re-educating, reorienting our students to learning what it means to learn, and that means what it means to be a human being in the world. And if we can negotiate all that within a short period of time, within the limits of the classroom, then I think we're doing our job. And we're not always going to be successful, as you just described.
And I would say, I'm just thinking about this now, like, to the person who just said, well, Nick and Tom are easy A's, right? And I don't believe that's true again. Yeah. But to the person who thinks that somehow they beat the system or that they won, first of all, that's back to ego. Yeah. And congratulations, you think you won. That's great. You won a battle that I wasn't fighting. But what I would say is that is less damaging than the austere teacher who
Uh,
has the truth and fails somebody who actually got it, right?
perfect.
Because
Perfect.
I don't know about you, but I know in my journey, there are classes that I got, but the teacher didn't know that I got it. Because in some ways I got it more than the teacher got it.
You
And,
bet.
you know?
You betcha. Oh, I know that sounds immodest, but it's not a bit immodest. That is so beautiful, Tom. And you know what? I see this sometimes in my own students. I have had every once in a while, I've got a student who's, I say to myself, whoa, she or he knows more than I do.
Yeah.
And they're
And
better fed than I am.
an opportunity.
You bet. And I love relating to it because number one, it humbles me. Number two, I learn how to encourage such brilliance.
And you know what? It goes back to, I had this conversation recently with a person, clearly a person. I had this conversation recently that that is the difference between, you, Chris Berg, Becky Black, Lucas Schaefer, myself, and others who come in and out of other people's classrooms. The conversation actually was with Nicole Barté, the chair of fashion, because that we know we don't know everything, and we also therefore don't need to be in charge, because there's a lot of the people who need to be in charge in their classroom, or whose classrooms might not be open to other teachers. That's being fed from a source of insecurity that subconsciously they actually do know that they don't know, and they're afraid, versus the laughing Buddha, you and I, who we know we don't know, and so what do we have to lose?
And that's Socrates as well. No, that's just beautiful. And we are not embarrassed by our ignorance. We are motivated by it. And besides, what do we think we're going to know anyway? What is this content we hold so precious?
Hey, first of all, I want to say that this conversation was not just collegial and intellectual, it was spiritual as well.
Me too, Tom. Thank you.
And I wanted to, as I mentioned, I was looking at your Facebook page, and I saw that your birthday was last month. And so I Googled your zodiac sign. So you probably know this already. I myself am a Taurus, but you are a Libra. And the first three things that came up for a Libra on my internet search, as scientific as that is social, analytical, and loyal. And I just laughed. I said, if that's not Nick Hardaker, I don't know what is. So Dr. Wayne and Nick Hardaker, thank you so much for being part of my life.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Tom. It's always a pleasure.